Jeffrey Epstein had powerful friends. And one of the witnesses testified that the friendship that he was the most proud of, that he bragged about the most, was his friendship with Donald Trump. Susan, I am so glad that I have you to talk to and vent, because I know that you and I may have different viewpoints, different perspectives, not different views, but different perspectives on the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me not leave her out. And both of us watched the press conference given by the survivors of his abuse, and led by members of Congress who, both Democrat and Republican, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, Senator Massey, Senator O'Connor, their lawyer, the lawyer for the women, all were there, and were interrupted by a flyover that Donald Trump says was just coincidental. It was to honor a foreign Polish pilot while the president of Poland was in his office. Okay, I leave that to everybody to decide whether they believe that it was coincidental. But
Right.
let's talk about your emotional reaction to what you heard. And then we can talk about how you and I maybe saw things a little differently.
Yeah. I thought it was powerful. I thought these women were so well spoken. I mean, granted, I'm sure they've worked with lawyers and they've talked about this for a long time, but you can tell that there's been a lot of introspection here. They've thought about this for years, for decades. This has affected their
And to their
lives.
therapists. It's not just to lawyers. They talk to therapists.
Absolutely. And I thought what they had to say was just so compelling. And it was just so horrendous. The minute they finished, that they showed Donald Trump in the Oval Office saying, "This is a Democrat hoax." That was so insulting to them that I don't even know. It if anything was going to motivate these women to name names now, I would think that did it. I mean,
So let's talk about that issue, which is they sort of at the end said they were putting together a list, but they didn't want to publish it. It was for them. And that raised a question of why they didn't put this list together, because
right.
they are the ones who know who abused them. They know, in the case of some of them, and I don't know if it was any of the 100 that were there or if it's others that they know who are still remaining silent for very good and valid reasons, who, when they aged out of being of interest to Jeffrey Epstein, were passed along by him to others who would accept, 20-year-olds. We're not talking about old people. We're talking about they just weren't 14 or 16. And so we
Well,
discussed this yesterday, and you had a very different take. So tell me
yes,
say what you said.
when we talked about it, one of the girls said, one of the women who was abused said, "Why should I go and make name names, and I have to fear from my safety and whatever. Why should I do it when
A
the government?"
genuinely valid point.
Right. And the government has this information and they can release it. So, and you said, well, they should release it if they want. You look at what E. Jean Carroll did. That's what you said, right? And
Well, I no, I let me
but
say
she was
what
someone who has means. That's the other
uh,
thing.
uh, she's in a completely different
Right.
circumstance, and he did
Right.
defame her. So,
Right.
but what I was saying is, the government, if it has information about who the abusers were beyond Ghislaine and Jeffrey, um, they got it from these women. They got it from who else? They don't have other sources. I mean, the only people who can really testify without it being hearsay, people who can say, I saw it, I was the victim of it, or my friend told me about it, are those very same women. So if it's released, it's coming from them anyway. So I just was, as a lawyer, saying, I'm not sure what else can be discovered. Now, it was interesting because their lawyer said, if you want information, the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the SEC,
Yeah.
and FinCEN Deutsche Bank and Morgan Stanley,
Morgan
because
Stanley.
and the last three, FinCEN, Morgan Stanley, and Deutsche Bank, were funding him, giving him $1 million in cash a year. And so they were basically funding his operation. Now, I don't know that they have any legal responsibility, but they have certainly information about where money was
Yep.
going and who he was paying. But except for those sources, which may reveal some interesting names, the only one who's going to be able to credibly say who the abusers were are these victims. And there are supposedly over 1,000 of them. 1,000. Imagine the
Yeah, over 1,000.
it's hard to believe that you could
As I
have
s
such an operation of trafficking.
as I said, I thought what Trump said immediately after they, I mean, those girls talking about that, they've talked about it's when they talk about it, it's almost like being re-victimized. They have to live
Of
through
course
it
it
and
is.
be traumatized. And for the next minute, for Donald Trump to have not an ounce of empathy, which we're not shocked about, to say what he said, that it's a hoax, was just so insulting. And
Right.
so when then Marjorie Taylor Greene came up with, well, if the girls, they're all going to put together a list,
And when we
supposedly.
say girls, you're referring to them
Women,
at the time they were 14 and 16. They are
yes,
now women and
women,
very credible witnesses.
exactly. And they were all going to put together this list. And Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday said, give me the names. I'll take it to the floor of the Congress. I'll read the names. And guess what? I think she will. My
I
prediction is she will.
and I hope it
I think it's
happens
going to be
soon. But again, as a lawyer, I'm just saying no one is going to not think that the source of her information is the current group of survivors. And they did testify when they were speaking in front of the Congress. They did testify to actual threats they have received, that their children have received.
right.
And so they have a legitimate reason to fear coming out against him. Um,
I have a legal question for you, though.
okay, go
So,
ahead, ask it.
so in terms of statute of limitations, and what does it all mean? Let's say these names come out, other than influencing public opinion. I mean, in the worst case scenario, like one of the women last night on Lawrence O'Donnell's talked about how she voted for Trump and she
Yes.
liked him, and now he did this. And she alluded to the fact that what's he hiding? Is he involved? Now, who knows if he is or he isn't? But if it comes out that he is, or some other big name, what is it going to mean other than to influence public opinion? And
So let me answer that, Susan. I think number one, the statute of limitation varies from state to state. And states like New York have passed a law that allowed E. Jean Carroll to bring a civil case well past the statute of limitations and allowed I think, a criminal case within a certain number of years of discovery of the passage of the law. So it may not apply anymore. It would be interesting if any of the people identified are currently serving in a position of public trust, either in the federal government or anywhere else. They would be subject to not just voters, but to possible impeachment. So that would be a consequence of the revelation of their names. If it's just an ordinary person, then, and this went to one of our other disagreements, was if you release an unredacted copy of everything,
yeah,
there could be false allegations in there. If they haven't been investigated, people's names may come out. We've had this discussion, not we, but on air, you've heard millions of people discussing, just because you were on the plane doesn't mean you did anything or even saw
right,
anything. It could have
right.
been a plane to somewhere, you flew to New York from Washington, D.C. The private plane was used for not just
What if
going
it's
to his island.
so and so raped me when I was 14 years old? Then what?
Right. If that's a different set of
And,
circumstances, I'm just saying that the push for unredacted release
right, but I have
is
another
a
question.
little frightening. Yes.
Wasn't there something about if you were sexually abused as a child, it extends the statute of limitations in some places? Am I right about
Yes.
that?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So might that
There,
apply here?
It
I
it
mean,
might. It certainly
some
could.
people
I mean,
14
it
years
just
old.
depends. It depends. And in some states, 12 is the age of consent, if you can believe that. So
Jeez.
we'd have to know what is defined. It depends on state law. It is something that we would have to individually research what each case involves. So is there reason to reveal names of people who are deceased, who are um, not in public office? Maybe. Is there a civil suit that could be brought against them now? Maybe not, because a lot of these women have settled with the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, and so they have no further legal remedies. Um,
But
it's a very difficult question to answer as a generic thing. It would
right.
have to be based on specific information.
The fact that Trump has been so out of his mind about this, I mean,
Yes.
doesn't that speak to something that he's hiding? I mean, just logically, not legally, but, you know, isn't there something he's hiding? There's gotta be. I mean,
Yes.
he's gone to such great lengths, and even his base wants him to release this.
Yes, and
He's
so I
finding
think
that too.
politically, he's going to suffer if he doesn't, and,
Right.
Lawrence O'Donnell had a wonderful show last night.
It was really good.
It was really good, and the survivor that he had on, who had been at the Capitol and had spoken at the Capitol, basically said the same thing. What is he hiding?
Right.
Why is he not getting it out? And again, I push back a little bit because as a lawyer, um, yes, do I think he's hiding something? I certainly do. What is he? Why is he still supporting Putin? He's
Right.
hiding something that Putin has on him.
Right.
There's a million things that I could say. I believe Donald Trump is in the wrong and is hiding something, and that still, I could say, I think that a full unredacted release may do more harm or will do some harm, maybe not more harm, but will do some harm, and that we have to be careful what we wish for. So I think more information needs to come out. I think the women deserved a full hearing in front of the Congress, a under oath time for legitimate questioning, for them to tell their story, for them to speak their truth, and to be heard in a situation where they're not outdoors fighting the sun, the heat, fly over planes, um, even if not deliberate, were distracting.
And
And
so what about Acosta? That's another whole thing we didn't
well,
even touch
yeah.
on. I mean, what was that? I mean, I'm reading, I've got the
Well, he
provision.
is coming to testify on September 18th. So
Okay. We'll hear.
let's talk about that. I think one of the most important and relevant investigations needs to be, how did Jeffrey Epstein get the sweetheart deal he got from
Exactly.
Acosta?
And
And I also want to point out, because people misunderstand this, everybody is saying, well, you know, Ghislaine has a appeal going that she is covered by the non-prosecution agreement that Acosta gave to Epstein, because he did give a non-pros to his co-conspirators.
but not
But
to her.
well, she's a co-conspirator, so technically she would be in that group. But the technical detail is that the crime for which he was indicted and which he was given the non-pros for is a different time period than she was indicted for. So
'Cause
even if she is
yeah,
free because of that prosecution agreement, non-prosecution agreement, for the crimes that he committed during that time period, that doesn't free her from the crime that she was convicted of that happened at a later time period. So
yeah,
folks, don't
on
think that she's going to succeed in her appeal.
right, Julie Brown's book, which I'm still reading, but she has a part where she said his lawyers were successful in getting prosecutors to insert a little notice provision in the deal, giving immunity to any potential criminal
Right,
accomplices, including but not limited to four women. And they named four women. Curiously, Ghislaine Maxwell was not listed,
right,
but the agreement's vague wording seemed to leave the door open for others to be covered by the global agreement.
right.
So
It
it's
it
it's
it does, but I'm saying that I think there is a technical glitch in that because of the time frame that the non-pros covers. So if you look at his indictment and the non-prosecution agreement, it covers a specific time period, which is different than the time period for which she is in jail.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I think we've covered our reaction to this. In general, I think anyone who didn't feel that these women were speaking the truth, that
Oh
they
boy.
were credible, and that you don't have a heart, you don't have a
Exactly.
soul, you don't have any emotion if you didn't feel broken up by it. And you mentioned Senator Mace and her breakdown because she is a victim, she's a survivor of sexual assault, and it really triggered her.
She left the
And
room crying,
so,
right?
yeah, she did leave crying, and, um, I think it's really it reminded me of one of the women who hadn't spoken. There was a question asked, and she said, "I'd like to answer that," because hearing the testimony in response to questions by Todd Blanche, of Ghislaine Maxwell, hearing her voice reminded me of the voice that she used, so calm, so quiet. That's how she established a bond with me.
She
That's
did.
how she
Yeah.
groomed me, and hearing that voice triggered a horrible response. So, this is a very bad situation for these women who will live and hopefully survive and thrive, but who are willing to take on this issue to protect their children and
Yeah.
your children. If you're listening, it's all of the children of the world who need protection from a mass trafficking episode that is unbelievable in its size and
Yeah.
dimension and damage. And it was accomplished because Jeffrey Epstein had powerful friends. And one of the witnesses testified that the friendship that he was the most proud of, that he bragged about the most, was his friendship with Donald Trump. And the picture, the 9 by 12, 8 by 12 picture that he had on his desk of the two of them.
Right.
So that is the sad state of affairs we find ourselves in, and I just hope that, there will be some peace, and there will be some truth and some light shed on this, and that there will be a list of names of people who can be held accountable for this horrendous episode in our history, and that Acosta and the attorney general at the time, can be held accountable for allowing the escape of this horrible pedophile.
And let's not forget Virginia Giuffre only died a few months ago. Her
Yes.
family, brother and his wife have been on TV a lot and very emotional. And it's been really, I mean, it's still their grief is raw, so
Yes.
it's, it's bad.
He her brother cried when he was testifying in front of the Capitol yesterday, and it's very moving because this shouldn't have happened to her to begin with, and it shouldn't happen to anyone going forward, and the only way to stop it and not repeat history is to understand the history and how it
Yeah.
happened. So
Yeah.
we're both hoping, I know, for full disclosure of information that will help the survivors get some comfort and some justice, and to prevent it from happening again, and to never let uh, a sweetheart deal like this, or like the transfer of Ghislaine to a club fed, where she has freedom to leave, freedom to use a car, freedom to drive.
It's terrible.
I did Mea
So
Culpa, Michael Cohen's um, podcast yesterday, and he is familiar with what club feds are because he was in a minimum security. But
right.
it wasn't nearly as nice, he said, as the one
Really?
in Texas where she is now. So that's wrong. It's wrong that she is
Yeah.
getting those benefits. It's wrong that Jeffrey Epstein used his money and his power to get the
There
benefits he
And
got.
there was one other provision that the lawyer for these women said they were to have been notified if there was any change in her status, right?
That's
And
the law, Susan. That is the law.
the law
The
and
Victims
learned on television,
Protection Act, yes, and it was totally ignored.
so
They
insulting.
learned about all this on television.
Right.
So let's make sure that we don't let this continue to happen, that we pay attention to what they're saying, and that we keep following what will be disclosed and how it will be disclosed. even if it is from a member of the Republican Party in the Senate or in the House. Let's let it happen.